Good evening, you're down with me, Yusuf Shukri for TVS Nightline. Our top story. The family of an Indian tourist who vanished into a sinkhole in Jalan Masjid India, Kuala Lumpur, is pursuing legal action against the federal government. Representatives for the victim, G. Vijaya Lakshmi, are demanding 824,000 ringgit in compensation, citing negligence in the 2024 incident that shocked the nation. Lawyers for the family confirm negotiations are underway with Kuala Lumpur City Hall, or DBKL, and the Federal Territories Ministry. The proposed sum draws a direct parallel to a 2023 precedent, where DBKL was held liable for a falling tree that killed a young boy. Legal counsel M. Parthiban argues that just as the court ruled negligence in that tragedy, the same failure in maintenance caused the ground to collapse beneath the victim. Lakshmi was on holiday in August 2024 when an 8-meter-deep sinkhole opened up beneath her along Jalan Masjid India. A 9-day search and rescue operation was ultimately called off without recovering her remains. A task force later pinned the cause on a sewer pipe weakened by chemical corrosion and soil instability. The victim's son, M. Surya, finally obtained his mother's death certificate yesterday, after 2 years of bureaucratic hurdles. His legal team says the compensation must account for the massive financial burden placed on the family, including repeated travel from India to Malaysia to seek justice. While the cabinet has previously discussed the proposal, the family is warning that the final settlement must reflect the gravity of their loss. Now, 4 men stand accused of a brutal killing, facing the death penalty after an elderly man is hacked to death in Teluk Intan. They are charged with the gruesome murder of 70-year-old N. Jayagobi alongside another accomplice who remains at large. The suspects, all just 25 years old, appear in the magistrate's court on Thursday to face murder charges linked to a violent robbery last April. No plea was recorded as the case falls under the exclusive jurisdiction of the High Court. The charge under Section 302 of the Penal Code carries the ultimate penalty of death, or up to 40 years in prison and no less than 12 strokes of the cane. Police say the horror unfolded in the early hours of April 17th when a gang armed with machetes raided a home in Pekanbaru. The elderly victim was struck multiple times, suffering severe lacerations to both hands before dying at the scene. Bail is automatically denied given the severity of the homicide charge. The court sets July 13th for the next case mentioned, while authorities continue the search for the remaining suspect. Now, talks on the peace deal became a headliner again today as Pakistan announces that it would happen soon. More on that later. Plus, a senior Hezbollah commander along 11 people were killed in the latest strike in Lebanon, a conflict Israel refused to withdraw from as the country is part of its plan to establish Greater Israel. Let's have Razi Ahmad on to look further into these topics.
Thanks, Yusuf. Earlier today, Pakistan states that it expects that a deal between the U.S. and Iran will happen soon, without giving any time frame. According to local reports, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Tahir Andrabi says if an agreement is reached in Pakistan, it would be an honor. However, he refused to confirm details of a potential pact amid U.S. media reports that Washington and Tehran are closing in on a one-page MOU. Further sources from the Pakistani government adds that Islamabad expects the U.S. and Iran to reach a primary agreement before U.S. President Donald Trump's China visit, which is scheduled for late next week. Pakistan hosted the first round of negotiations between Washington and Tehran on April 11th and 12th, but failed to produce an agreement to end the war. Now, in one of the many occasions, statement from U.S. President Donald Trump is coherent with those made by Iran. In a recent interview, he states the deal is getting very close.
With that being said, they want to make a deal. We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours, and it's very possible that we'll make a deal. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. According to multiple reports by U.S. mainstream media, one of the agreed terms is that Iran must hand over its highly enriched uranium to the U.S. And when asked, Trump replied, no, it was not part of the deal. However, the U.S. demanded that Iran must pledge not to operate any underground nuclear facilities. Now, in Lebanon, strikes continue, and Israel confirms that a senior commander from Hezbollah's elite force was killed after it bombed Beirut's southern suburbs on Wednesday. On top of that, Lebanon's health ministry reported 11 other deaths following strikes across the south and the east. Benjamin Netanyahu states that the strike was meant to subdue Hezbollah's Radwan force, but it does not justify their daily attacks on the country. Beirut and its southern suburbs had been spared Israeli attacks since April 8, when massive Israeli strikes across the country killed more than 350 people. AFP reports that the attack came when Trump says there was a very good chance of sealing a peace deal with Iran. Amid continued tensions over the Strait of Hormuz, Iran states that the country's ports are prepared to provide maritime services, technical support, supplies, and medical assistance to vessels operating in Hormuz and regional territorial waters. Reports by Iran's Islamic Republic news agency IRNA, all vessels navigating territorial waters, particularly those located in Iranian waters and ports, can benefit when needed from supply services, fuel provision, health and medical services, as well as maintenance materials. The organization says the message would be broadcast through maritime communications networks and very high-frequency VHF systems in the region 3 times daily for 3 days. And finally, Netanyahu says his country is prepared for all scenarios in dealing with Iran, in a video statement released by his office. In a video statement, he says the U.S. will be the backbone in resolving all situations, including removing all enriched materials, which many assume is uranium, from Iran while dismantling its enrichment capabilities.
יש בינינו תיאום מלא, אין הפתעות. אנחנו חולקים יעדים משותפים, והיעד החשוב ביותר הוא הצעת החומר המועשר מאיראן, כל החומר המועשר, ופירוק יכולות ההעשרה באיראן. הנשיא טראמפ מאמין שהוא יכול להשיג את זה בדרך זו או בדרך אחרת. אנחנו אבל ערוכים לכל תרחיש, וזו ההנחיה שלי גם לצה"ל ולגורמי הביטחון שלנו.
Those were some of the updates from ongoing conflict in West Asia. Let's go back to Yusuf for the rest of tonight's report.
Thank you, Rizey. Now, rising tensions in the Middle East are now drawing both China and the United States into a growing diplomatic and economic standoff. As Washington pushes Beijing to pressure Iran over the Strait of Hormuz, China is also facing increasing pressure over its continued purchase of Iranian oil. RT correspondent Konstantin Rojkov has the report.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is visiting China just days ahead of a high-stakes meeting between Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping here in Beijing. Araghchi has been on a very busy diplomatic tour lately, visiting countries like Russia, Oman, Pakistan, and now China. China has also repeatedly offered political support to Tehran and called the U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iranian territory illegal. So there is clearly a strong relationship between Beijing and Tehran. Now, Trump's, who appears to be keeping his upcoming meeting with Xi Jinping very much in mind, believes China should use Araghchi's visit to pressure Iran into reopening the Strait of Hormuz.
In all fairness, he gets like 60% of his oil from Hormuz, and I think he's been very respectful. We haven't been challenged by China. They don't challenge us, and he wouldn't do that. I don't think he'd do that because of me. But I think he's been very respectful. And we've offered, if he wants to send the ships to the United States. I think one of the big things that's happened is I made a statement.
But despite the friendly tone, it's far from smooth sailing in U.S.-China relations. Just days ago, Beijing activated its so-called blocking mechanism against U.S. sanctions targeting Chinese oil refineries accused of buying Iranian crude. Beijing is essentially saying not only that U.S. sanctions should be ignored, but also that there could be consequences for companies that comply with them. For example, by refusing services or terminating contracts with the sanctioned refineries. American officials have already upped the ante in the sanction standoff, warning that secondary sanctions could be imposed on those who ignore the original restrictions. At the same time, the U.S. has submitted a draft resolution to the United Nations Security Council focused on shipping security in the Strait of Hormuz. Here's what U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had to say about that.
And I think to both the Chinese and the Russians, I would argue and have argued that it is in their interest for that resolution to pass and for pressure to be brought on Iran, because it is in their interest not to see international waterways, including the Straits of Hormuz, be closed down and cause economic chaos to dozens and dozens of countries around the world.
Also, Beijing instructed its firms to ignore U.S. sanctions. Could you also address that?
Well, I'll direct you to Treasury on that front. There are options that we have. If you ignore our sanctions, you're going to face secondary sanctions. And I don't have an announcement for you on that today, but we don't do these things, for symbolic purposes.
China wants stable ties with both Iran and the United States, but with tensions in the Middle East rising, shipping routes under pressure, and sanctions threats flying back and forth, staying on good terms with everyone is becoming harder by the day. I'm Konstantin Rashkov reporting for RT from Beijing, China.
Welcome back. Now back in Sarawak, Germany is ready to deploy high-tech expertise and strategic investment proposals to fuel the state's economic surge, specifically targeting energy transition, AI and semiconductors. German Ambassador to Malaysia, Zilke Riekender, says a business delegation of nearly 20 companies is now on the ground to deepen their understanding of the state's rapidly evolving ecosystem and investment potential. Germany's technological strengths, she says, are positioned to leapfrog Sarawak's growth in critical strategic sectors.
We came not only alone, but we came backed up by a business delegation of close to 20 companies who are out and about with their own program right now. And we are drilling into various sectors where Sarawak is excelling. We've been discussing the energy transition, we've been discussing artificial intelligence, semiconductors, but also infrastructure projects.
At the same time, the Executive Director of the Malaysian-German Chamber of Commerce, Hannes Parlock, notes the mission aims to bridge the investment gap between Peninsular Malaysia and Sarawak. While nearly 800 German firms are currently invested in the peninsula, their footprint in Sarawak remains at a minimum.
There's a lot of common ground that we share, especially talking about sovereignty of infrastructure, sovereignty of actually artificial intelligence, where we as Germans and Europeans are really also putting a lot of effort now in trying to understand how to make that happen. Also talking about smart cities, infrastructure, tying in all the topics like semiconductors, hydro with AI.
The delegation have also visited local tech firms, XFAB and SMD Semiconductor, with preliminary negotiations already underway between the parties.
And that wraps up tonight's TVS Nightline. I'm Yusuf Shukri. Thank you for watching and good night.